Hello, and thanks for joining me. We're going to be painting this 11 by 14 inch stretch canvas with acrylic paint today. I'm going to move this. And here is my blank canvas all ready to go. Let me make sure I have that centered. First thing we're going to have to do is draw on some of our placement lines. So what I'm doing is I'm going to come up 3 inches from the bottom and make a line. Then I'm going to make marks every 2 inches the rest of the way up. And then I'm just using this little plastic T-square to project my lines across. This is an oldie but goodie. I've had this quite a while, as you can see, but it still works great. Flip it over this way. Okay, so this is our shelf and this is our wall, and we're going to go ahead and paint those first, paint our whole background. Then I have a template that I've made that represents the jars, and I will make this template available if you want to download and print it. But first we're going to do the background, and these are the paints that I have: titanium white, cadmium yellow. I have a little burnt umber and raw sienna, but any brown you have would work. Primary yellow, cadmium orange, cadmium red, viridian green, cadmium green, and a yellow green, and then just some black. You notice I have a lot more white because we do use a lot of white. And that is where we're going to start. We're going to start with a 1-inch wash brush. If yours is a different size, that's fine. We don't have to be real precise when we're using a wash brush. I also have just some rinse water, paper towel for dabbing off my excess. And I'm just going to start by painting white on for the first 2 sections. I'm going to paint right over my pencil mark. And if you're not sure if you've covered the whole thing, if you pick up the canvas, it will be shiny. And that's how you know it's wet. And we want to keep it wet. That's why we're only doing the first 2 sections. I see, I think I need a little bit there. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick up a round brush. And this is probably a number 8 round, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to take a little bit of black paint. Can you see how little there is on there? And I'm going to come just lightly. I'm going to put somewhere that line in the paneling on the wall would go. And then I'm just going to put a few more streaks on here. They look a little bold right now, but I'm going to take my white paintbrush, which I haven't rinsed. I actually picked up a little bit more paint, and I'm just going to go over them. And the paint underneath is still wet, so we're getting a wet on wet blending, and you can see how much softer those lines look. Now I'm going to wipe my brush off so I get any of that black off before I do the next section. But I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to come, make sure you work horizontal. I don't want those lines real dark. I want it to look like weathered wood and be kind of grayed out. So I'm going to pick up a little bit more white here and just go over this until I get it softened up a bit. So I'm just applying white and being careful. If you work over that black too much, you'll have gray. That's why I keep wiping my brush off on my paper towel in between. Okay, we're going to keep moving
down into the next section. When I first did my sample painting, my black lines were too strong, so I am being cautious this time to not make them as dark. You notice I'm keeping my brush strokes all going horizontal. We're letting the brush do some of the work here to create the pattern. Okay, I think that's pretty well covered. I'm going to come black back in. Again, I've just picked up just a little bit of black. I'm going to do the same thing. Kind of just long dashes where those lines go, and then just a few little black lines. I'm not too worried about in here. We do have our pots, our jars that will sit there. But go this way, come back this way. And okay. So we're just doing the same thing we did on the top half. Okay, then you can take a look and see if there's anywhere you think you need more black. Or I'm going to try to bring a little bit more white paint up here. I think that corner was a little bit dark. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Okay, I'm going to keep a little bit of my white, and I'm going to paint the bottom section now. I don't think we need to cover it quite as well as we did before. I'm actually going to wet my brush just to get that extra paint that's on there.
Okay, now I'm going to pick up some of my browns. I'm going to take, I've got two here, and I'm just going to come in. So this is the burnt sienna, which you can see, this is a real warm brown, has definitely some red undertone, almost has a terracotta color to it. And then, just going to rinse that off. And in between rinses, I usually dab my paper towel to get the excess water off. So if your paint seems too watery, you need to remove the excess. And this is burnt umber, which is a cooler brown. Okay, so now I've got that on there. I'm going to just blend it. So I didn't worry too much where I put the colors. I just want to blend it out. I want to blend it right over my edge. I'm just building up my color. So it gives me a little bit of a wood grain look. I'm going to wrap that brown around the edge also. You don't have to paint your edges. Again, that is up to you. And this front edge. We're going to take a little bit of black and come back in and do the same thing we did up on the wall. We're going to put a little bit of graining and some planks in our wood. So back to my round brush. I'm just going to put just some little, see those like long dashes? I'm not too worried about right there where the pots are, but I definitely want some here in the foreground. Okay. And I'm just going to take that brush and soften those up. yeah, we kind of have a weathered looking wood area. I'm going to go ahead and let this dry. I'll pause the video and be back in a couple minutes when it's dry, or you can run and dry yours with the blow dryer. Okay, I'm back. This is nice and dry. And I have this template of the 4 jars. Let me just show you in the painting again. We have 3 and then a brighter yellow. These 3 are cream. You can do any combination of color you want. But you see, I placed it maybe a little over an inch off the bottom. You can move that up a little bit if you wanted to put a Bible verse or something else down there, maybe your family name. You could always do that. But I'm going to keep it pretty close. I'm just going to kind of center it side to side and bring it down about there. And I'm going to give it a quick trace. And I'm just using a regular pencil. It's going to give me enough of a line that I'll see where I want to paint. If you want, you can draw right on without the template. You can erase a little bit off from this if the paint is dry enough and you use a white polymer eraser. But until that paint has aged a bit, it is hard to get the pencil off. And if it's wet at all, then it becomes part of the paint and you won't get it off. You'd have to paint over it. Okay, so we have our 4 jars on. Just going to come back, put my little lines down here, and I'm going to make the top of that jar the top of that line. Okay, I'm going to just grab a smaller square brush. This is a 1/2 inch square, and I'm going to paint my jars white. Now, if you really wanted to, you could have drawn the jars on first and painted around them. And that would probably maybe make your jars a little less labor intensive, but you had to outline and then really follow the edges of the background. And I just think this is a little bit quicker and easier. And we may have to put 2 coats on, so I'm not really worrying too much. I just want to make sure I have the area all blocked out with white right now. I'm doing up onto the wall too because I don't want the dark lines to show through. You notice I'm just turning my brush in the corner. I'll try to hold my hand a little different there for you. We're going to draw the flowers on next. So I wanted to get this on so this could be drying while we're doing that. Okay, I'll try to show you this corner without my arm being in the way. I'm not sure what's best. Okay, so if I come down, I get to the corner, I'm just using that square brush and just letting it make the turn. See that? Made a nice little edge in there. And I'm going to come across and do the same thing. So I'm going to kind of stop and turn my brush 90 degrees. Okay. had a few people show some interest in this painting on one of my Facebook pages, and it had some birds in it. I didn't put the birds in, but you certainly could go back later and add them. Okay, so we've got those, our first coat of white on there. And now we're going to come in and we're going to draw our flowers. And I really like the placement of the flowers I have here. The one thing I'm going to do a little bit different is I don't really like these two leaves. So I think I'm going to try to do it without those two leaves, see how it looks. I can always add them at the end. But I had 4 flowers here, 3 full, 1 sideways, 2 full, 1 sideways, 4 full, 1 sideways. So they all are a little bit different. And all you're going to do is we're going to put, you could even trace a quarter if you wanted to. But I'm just going to kind of lay out where I want the middle of my flowers. And make sure, like this one, I want it over far enough so when I put the petals on, it comes out past the jar. And then my little half over here, I'm just going to do like a kind of an almond shape. Same thing down here. I'll do two and my little almond shape right here. This is just a little bit of greenery. So I'm just going to kind of lay out a little taller here, and then it's going to come down, and it's actually going to drape over the front of that jar a little bit. And then here, let's see. Let's try here. 2, 1 in the center, 1 lower, 1 over here. And then our little half one, maybe up here. Okay, I think that's a pretty good placement. Now we are going to come back and draw our petals on. And the petals are very easy. Doesn't matter how many you have. There's 2 rows of petals. So how about I'll start right here. I'm just gonna, so they're wider at the base where they meet the flower, or the center, and they're bigger, narrower at the tip, I'm sorry. Then in between, you're going to come back and just put that back row in there, just little V's where those stick out. Okay, now this one, that petal's not going to show too well, it's behind there, but the rest of them we can. And I do want this to come right down over that jar. Maybe 1 more petal there, and then put a few in the middle. This flower, I am going to move. I don't have the eraser that I want to use handy. Or do I? Let me just look back here real quick. Aha! I found one. So this is a polymer eraser. I usually get them at back to school time. You can get a couple in a pack for like $1.99. That's when I buy a lot of my pencils, these erasers, Sharpies, markers. It's a great time. Okay. pretty good. And then I'm going to move it over about to there. Okay. And put these petals on. I probably could have paused this for you after I showed you how, but I'll just keep working away here. Okay, I am going to pause it while I finish drawing this on. And you can pause yours too. I'll see you back here in a minute. So we'll leave those like that. Then for this brighter jar, I'm going to take some more of the yellow. I'm going to come on this side. I'm going to take a little bit of this primary yellow too. I'm going to mix those together with just a little bit of my cream. I like that cream. It just softens it up. I could have used just the yellow, but gives it just a little more of an opaqueness, I guess I'm going to say. Well, I think that's darker, brighter. Beautiful. I love yellow, especially this time of year. It's springtime. We had some beautiful spring weather, and the last 2 weeks we've had a spring day and then a snowy day. And that gets a little bit old fast. It's April 21st today. Yeah, April 21st. This coming Saturday, April 25th, my youngest daughter was going to be married. But because of the coronavirus, we've had to postpone the ceremony until August. I feel bad for them. All that planning and time and work. Okay, I'm going to make this plant a little bit taller. I think I want it to come up almost to the top of that jar. And I'm going to place some leaves on now. The leaves are kind of like hearts that are pulled long. So you start with the top is like a heart, and then it has a long tail. Sometimes you just see the tail. I'll have some stems in there. I'm not going to squeeze any leaves in here. I'm just going to have the stems. So here I think we'll put another one of those hearts in. And let's put a tail over here. I definitely want a leaf coming down that comes back up and over the corner of that jar. Let's No, I think I'll keep that one behind the jar. Yeah, let's start with those. We're actually not going to paint those right now. I'm going to grab a round brush. We're going to do the back petal first. And what that back petal is some of this cadmium yellow and orange. A little bit more of that. What do you think? I think that's probably it right there. Okay, so I'm going to give my brush a little bit of a roll on there, which helps distribute the paint and keep a nice little point on it. And I'm going to come in and paint those. And how I'm going to paint them is I'm going to start at the tip and pull in. Sorry, I've got to reposition my hand. So I'm just going to lay my brush down and just pull them in. Let the tip of your brush make the tip of the petal. And we're going to go through. Now here, one would be back there, so I'm just going to get a little bit in. Kind of give the impression of a petal there. And I'm going to do that the whole way around. And I'm going to let you work at your own pace. So I am going to go ahead, pause this, and get this background color on all my petals. And you can do the same and start it back up when you are ready to continue. Okay, did everybody get that dark back petal on? They look kind of abstract right now, but I'm going to go ahead and put a second coat on my pots before we do the next petal. I think you have the wrong paint because it looks so much lighter than the dried wall. It's a good thing to remember is that paint usually dries darker than what it appears when it's wet. Okay, now we're going to do a little work on the inside petal. And for that, I'm going back to my round brush. And I'm going to take some of the yellow. I'm going to actually scoop the rest of my yellow up in there. And some of this shade of yellow. And I'm not going to mix them real well. But I'm going to come back in. I'm going to lay that point down and just pull it up. And if it goes into the middle a little bit, we're going to be covering that with brown, so you don't have to worry too much about it. Let me just get this brush loaded well. Give it a little twist. So I'm laying the tip down, then I'm pushing and lifting up as I come back, and it just makes a nice petal shape. Push down and lift. We're just going to go around and do all of our inside petals. Now those petals are going to get a little highlight and shadow on them, so they look like quite the difference from the outside petals right now, but they won't when we get the other layers on. And let me show you what I'm talking about. You can see in here, can you see there's some white and there's some different colors, little shades in there. And we're going to add all of that. Just kind of going to build it up to get some depth into those petals and make them look like they have a little bit of movement to them. You're going to want to reload your brush often to keep that point sharp and them filled in. Okay, I'm going to pause again, finish my yellow, and I will see you guys back here in a couple minutes. Okay, we're back. Hope you got your petals all on. Isn't that just bright and cheery right now? I'm going to come in now. We're going to do a little bit of work on our leaves and our green, but I'm going to take a little bit of this yellow green and I'm going to come in and just kind of paint my background here. I want that squiggly edge. The nice thing, I guess, about doing the classes via video as opposed to in person is you can work at them whenever you want or at your own pace. So if you need to stop and want to start again in a day or two, you can. And if you want to keep your paints, a lot of times if you just cover them with saran wrap or cellophane, they'll keep for a couple days. You may have to give them a little touch of water, but overall they keep pretty well. Okay, so we've got that background green on there. I know, it looks really bright right now, but it's not going to. I'm going to switch to my 1/2 inch chisel brush and I'm going to undercoat, and it's going to look like a highlight when it's done, but I'm going to undercoat half of the petal. So think of the petal as which side would be exposed to the sun. A little bit. My brush was a little bit too wet there. Get some of that water out of there. So it'd be the top side. And I'm just going to come in with a little bit of this color on that top side. See the difference with too much water? It just thinned it out and really doesn't even look good. This is bright right now, but when we get the other color on, it won't be. Okay. Now we're going to mix up. I'm going to take some of this green that is the cadmium green and just kind of divide that because I don't need all of it. And I'm going to take a little bit of the cadmium red and I'm going to mix that into the green. And what that does is it makes it a little more brown. So it's giving us, so we'll have two shades here. We'll have a darker color on this side and a brighter color on the other side. So anytime you take two opposites on the color wheel, they make different shades of brown. So yellow and purple, blue and orange, green and red. And that is the shade that that makes. So let me clean my brush off. And I'm going to start, I'm going to put some stems on here. Wouldn't see much up in here. Okay. Now I'm going to come back in with that chisel brush. And I'm going to pick up some of the brighter green. No, you know what? I'm just going to go right to the dark green. Come from the tip. Just going to come up in. You have to get in that flower, in between those petals a little bit. And I'm going to go right over that lighter side. I'm just using the very tip of my brush to get in between the petals. So we have our petals undercoated. Then I'm going to come back on my stems with that darker color. And I'm going to kind of go down one side. Okay. Now I'm going to take a small brush to do my little plant in here. And if you look, you can see they're just little lines. I've left lots of the light color in between. Get that brush wet. Again, I'm going to give that a little roll on the side there so I got a nice point. And let's come in here with, I'm just going to do kind of like little, see that? Just kind of want them all in threes, but I like that kind of grouping. Just adding a touch of water to that paint. It's just not quite liquid enough. The paints have been out for a while and they're drying up a little bit, so some are going to be growing upward. Some right over here over the edge so we don't have a line of that yellow green. We want to break that up a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to grab just a touch of my Viridian green, and I'm going to come back in with, actually, sorry, I need to mix a little bit of the Viridian with that color that I just had. There we go, just to make a little darker and give that a little more contrast in there. So that is Viridian with the red and green that we had made when we browned up that shade a little bit. Okay. Okay, that looks good. I think we will come through next and put our next layer on our pots and our flowers. Okay, so we're going to add a little highlight to our canning jars. And I'm just going to take a little bit of white. And I'm just going to dry brush it on. And all this is, again, is a reflection of where the light would hit the jar. So as you can see, I'm just kind of coming across. That's a little bit too much paint. Let me wipe some off on my towel. Just giving that. So you can almost picture the light reflecting off from it. And you notice I'm not going out to the corner because they're rounded. So we want to keep it in just a little bit, our reflection. And again, it's just subtle. I'm going to put a little bit in that corner. And just dry brushing it around, blending it in a little bit. Now on the yellow, we have to be careful that it's not too bright. So I'm just going to take a little bit. I'm actually going to dab a touch off on my paper towel. You can always add more. It's easier than taking it off. So again, I'm keeping the same shape, different color jar, but it's still the same shape. So we want that rounded. Just taking a little bit of water in there to soften it up a little bit. Okay, now we're going to paint our centers on our brown flowers. And again, you can use whatever color brown you want. We're going to put the centers in, then we can come back and put our highlights on. So I'm going to use, I think I'll just mix a little bit of these two together. Brighten that umber up a little bit, but be dark enough to look like a nice sunflower center. Now I've switched to a little bit smaller flat square brush. It's a little bigger than a 1/4 inch, but you can paint these with whatever brush you want. A filbert brush would be great if you have one. Looks like I'm going to have to give them a second coat to make them dark enough. We're going to create some highlights and shadows in the middles too, but we're not going to do it. We're going to use little polka dots so it looks like reflections on the seeds. To do that. Okay, now the green petals, we're going to come back, give them another coat. I'm going to keep so I'm going to make a little bit more. So I'm taking some of that cadmium green and a little bit of the red and a little bit of the viridian for the last coat. Maybe a touch more of that. I know I do not have the best camera set up, so you can't see real well what I have there. Okay, I'm just going to use that same small square brush that I was using for the petals, or for the centers, and come back. I want some of the background color to show through. Can you see that up there? If you're new to my paint classes, I don't usually record myself. I usually teach them in person. So I am not great at this, and you just have to bear with me. If it's something I end up doing, I will invest in some better equipment. But for now, this is just to give my painters and my kids' paint classes and people sitting home with nothing to do, something to do. Now we're going to do the outlining on our canning jars. And I'm going to use my small, I guess this is about a number 1 or number 2. I might as well stick with the same color that we used for the middle of the sunflowers, but I am watering it down because when you're doing lines and details like that, you want the paint to spread and flow better. There's a chunk in there. So I've made it, if you can see, it's pretty watery. And I'm going to just run my brush along the side. And I'm going to start over here and work this way so I'm not dragging my hand through it as I go. And the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to outline the outside of the jar. And that's not a very good line there, is it? Okay. Then I'm going to make some lines up here that would be kind of like the screw marks where it would screw on the lid. And then I'm just going to come in and I'm going to imply some corners. So just a few little lines to give the impression that it's round. We're just going to keep doing that the whole way around. Now this one, I still want little marks there. I don't usually recommend the craft type, like the apple barrel. Those are great for craft projects, but not necessarily for a canvas that you want to have some longevity. Plus, they don't have much pigment in them. They're a lot of medium and not much pigment. So a medium grade acrylic is just fine. You can get tube acrylics anywhere, even like Walmart. The ones that I'm using are their Royal Langnickel, and I got a set of 12 of them. They had everything in them except the brown. For my normal classes, I usually buy these student grade Blick acrylics, but these would be really big for you to buy if you're just a painter at home. And brushes, find what you're comfortable with. You can spend a lot of money on brushes. You can spend just a little bit. You can buy a set or find the ones that you like the best and then start picking them up one at a time. We're going to put some little jute string on our canning jars now. So I'm going to take a little bit of the brown, take a little bit of white, and a little touch of black, just to gray it out a little bit. And that was a hair too much black, so let's just put in some more of these. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to come across and then make a little knot. And then put a couple little tails coming off. Kind of want the ends to look frayed. And this one, I'm going to do the same across the top here. Then I'm going to put a little knot here, and I'm going to put a little loop. Maybe two. So just the hint of a bow there. And then this last one, I'm going to come and have that one coming straight down. So just a little knot and a couple little tails. Again, I want the ends to look a little frayed, so I'm just giving them that. Okay, now let's put a little highlight and vein on our leaves. I'm going to take a touch of, I think this yellow. And I'm going to come just a little bit on the top edge. Can you see that? It's pretty light, but kind of from the middle. There you go. I'll try to make it a little bit bolder so you can see it. Okay, I think you can see that. Then I'm going to take some white. And again, we just want a little reflection where the light might be shining on the flower or on the leaf, and a little bit where the stem, where it might be reflecting off the stem. And you don't have to go down the whole side of the leaf. Again, we just want a reflection. This one, I think I'll put more at the top. For the center of the flowers, we're going to put some white dots and some black dots. And I'm just taking the very tip of my brush, and I'm just going to make in this top kind of like 12 to 3 o'clock range. I'm just going to put some white dots in each one. I'm actually going to show you the black and then pause and let you work on your own pace here. So that is the white, and we're going to do the same thing with the black, except the only difference with the black is we're going to come on the flower too. So this is kind of like 9 to 6, but can you see I'm putting some, and I don't want them symmetrical, but so we've got the darker shadow at the bottom, and I've brought those dots right into the petals. You can use the end of a toothpick if you want some real little dots, if you aren't comfortable with painting them. With the brush, if you have a real little brush, you can use the back of the brush. That'll make a little bit bigger dots, but they are easy that way. There's something about when they fall into the flower petals, it breaks up that flower a little bit. we're going to be putting some outlining on too, which is going to do that. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to finish my dots and I'll be back with you in just a minute. Okay, is everybody done with their little polka dots? The next thing we're going to do, we're almost done. We just are going to do a little bit of outlining and adding our words. For the words, if you have a stencil or something, you can use that. Otherwise, I'm going to draw it on in pencil and then paint over it. And you can see the difference in the flowers from this painting to this painting. If you don't want them outlined, you don't have to. I like them in this design. I think it gives it a really polished look. And you don't have to outline the entire flower perfectly. So we want it to look like it was just quick, and so I'm making a little puddle of black that is watery again because I'm working with a fine brush and I just want to pick up a little bit. So I'm just going to come in and that's all I'm doing, just with the very tip of my brush, just a few bristles. If you're heavy-handed, you can well, I finished the outlining and I've started writing on.
What'd you do?
That's my husband.
I don't know who's there. Who's
He
there?
thinks I'm talking to him, but I'm talking to you. Okay, so today this one's going to say choose. You see, I'm just kind of giving myself a guide. I'm going to use paint, but you could, if you really weren't comfortable painting the words, you can use a black Sharpie marker. Okay. I think I'm going to use a little bit bigger brush to do that. And again, you should find the one that you're most comfortable with.